Good to go.
All right, so welcome everybody. Today is our orthopedic match panel. We have wonderful match panelists that agreed to volunteer their time and talk to you today. Just quickly, just our Adler Society, just want to introduce ourselves again. Dr. Carl Sweeney is our advisor. I'm Sana. Grace, Tom, Jack, and Karam are all part of the Adler Executive Board, so feel free to ask us questions after this meeting or if you have any other questions. Okay. All right. And the schedule for today, what we're thinking of doing was opening the floor for questions for the first 45 minutes or so, and then doing small groups with each of the panelists. We'll put a couple of you with each of the panelists. You can ask a little bit more if you feel like a smaller group setting is more comfortable for you, or if you have more personalized questions that you want to ask, that we're giving you that type of setting as well. So we have 4 panelists here today: Wafa, Ruben, Annalise, and Elliot. They've matched Wafa at University of Kansas, Wichita, Ruben at University of Louisville, Annalise at University of Washington, and Elliot at University of Tennessee Health Sciences. So what we're going to do is just kind of open the floor, first of all. And I'm going to let the panelists also introduce themselves so you know who's who, and then we can get started. All right, so let's say, Wafa, do you want to go first?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Bafa. Obviously a 4th year, just matched at University of Kansas in Wichita, like Santa said. So happy to be here. Happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Maybe we can just go alphabetically here. I think I would be next. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Ruben. I recently matched at the University of Louisville. Go Cardinals, I suppose I can say that now.
I'm Annalise. I just matched at the University of Washington. Yeah, ready to answer any questions you guys have.
Hey, Elliot, just matched at Campbell Clinic in Memphis, so happy to be here and help you guys out if I can.
All right, so we can have everyone ask questions. If you feel more comfortable, you can put it in the chat box. Tom will be monitoring that as well. But it'd be great if you can just ask on Zoom, and we will try to make sure that everybody's questions get answered.
Mind if I break the ice? So perfect. So I just like to start with, because you guys all match. First of all, congratulations to all 4 of you. I think, I'm really happy that everybody has got a job next year. That's not always a given in orthopedics. And so I think you need to be committed for the work you put in up to this point. And it's a tough match, and you guys put in the effort and you did the right thing. And I'm really happy for all 4 of you. Now each of you is going to a very different kind of program, whether it's FAFA, more of a community program in Wichita, Elliot more at that, high level trauma center. Washington is a big research powerhouse. We just have all these different sort of, and Louisville, I'm sorry, and Louisville is its own kind of academic place that I think is similar to Kansas in a lot of ways. And so I would love to, if we could go, and I like the idea of alphabetical, we start with Annalise, just talk a little bit about your thought process on where you liked to go and the flavor of the different programs and what helped you make those choices.
You want to do it alphabetically again, Vafa, start maybe?
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking first names. Yeah, go for
it. Sure. I'll kick it off. Yeah, so I'm going to more of a community program in Wichita. So I guess, some of the things that I guess really appealed to me with Wichita, they really pride themselves with the hands-on experience, operatively and obviously in the clinic setting. So I feel like you got a really good, thorough breadth of orthopedic experience there, which was something that was personally what I was looking for. I guess when I was going through the whole process of what I'm looking for in a program, my #1 priority was obviously the culture. I think you're not really going to get a good experience anywhere you go, no matter how great the operative, clinic, research experience is, if you're miserable for the 5 years. Like that's just the truth of it, I guess. So to me, it was really what residents, what faculty, what attendings I got along with at the program. And then second to that, I really wanted to be able to graduate after 5 years and feel comfortable with my orthopedic knowledge, both in the clinic and, just as far as being able to operate. You have 5 years to learn as much as you can, as much general orthopedics as you can. I think about 90% of people, I may be wrong in this, but I think 90% of people go on to, get a fellowship. So for me, I really wanted to focus on where it gives me the best, holistic, all around overall orthopedic experience. And that's something you get more so from a community program. Some things you sacrifice, I guess, with the community program, definitely, the research component. We're not going to be pumping out as many papers as they're going to be pumping out in Washington, in Tennessee and other places. So it really comes down to where your priorities are. And another thing is, where you see yourself in 10, 15, 20 years. Because obviously, residency and where you go for residency lays that foundation as far as what you want to be doing down the line. So I guess those are all things to consider, at least what I considered, when looking at the interview and what was important to me.
I think I might be next. And that was honestly such a comprehensive answer. Like, I don't want to repeat a whole lot of the things that Vafa has pointed out, but some of the things that stood out that I would agree with is, the culture is probably the biggest thing. You want to go somewhere where you feel like you can fit in, you can be your most authentic self and can kind of contribute to the team in that way. But to answer your question, Dr. Sweeney, I think some of the things that I looked for, just me specifically, I feel like I decided orthopedics a little bit later on than a lot of my colleagues. And research just had not really been an emphasis for me. So that kind of led me to look a little bit more towards more blue collar programs, some programs that may not emphasize as much research, kind of like Vafa was talking about, but that would still have a really good operative experience, a lot of autonomy, somewhere where I felt like I could fit in and where I got along with everybody. And luckily I was able to kind of glean that from a lot of the interviews. And they also had probably one of the most fun pre-interview night kind of socials, I guess you could put it. So I think we kind of got started off on the right foot that way.
Yeah, I feel like we all kind of had a similar path of Ruben and I both kind of came to ortho late, and then I think I had the same mindset as Vafa when I was deciding. I cast a pretty wide net, and I interviewed at a lot of different places that were really different from each other. And I interviewed at some community places, and I rotated in Wichita as well. So I got to see what that was like. And I, interviewed and applied to places that were really different from each other. I didn't only apply academic. And then when it came down to it, I realized that I fit more into the academic setting, and that's kind of what I suspected from the beginning anyways. But I didn't have like a ton of orthopedic research when I was applying, and I decided on ortho like midway through my third year. So I didn't come in, meeting all the faculty and getting to know everyone. So I don't think that's a make or break thing if you want to go somewhere academic. And then I also wanted somewhere that had decent operative experience, and Washington has a huge catchment area for trauma. So that was another thing that I considered, because trauma is something that I wanted to be really strong at when I got done with my 5 years. And I interviewed at places that were really academic that I could tell from the residents, they would say in kind of not so many words, that they don't get to operate as much, at least not earlier on in their residencies. So those are things that I took into account when I was making my rank list as well. Yeah, if you guys have any other questions, like later on, you can ask them.
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot extra to add to all that. Vafa and Ruben and Annalise kind of hit everything around the head. For me, the one thing during interviews, at Campbell Clinic, the program director, he specifically said, he was that his only job was to make me the best general orthopedic surgeon that he could do. And then, if I wanted to do fellowship after, then that's great for me. And that kind of, set home for me. And that was why I, ranked them so high, and I wanted to go there. No other program, came out and verbalized that to me. So that was, it was huge for me, and I couldn't be happier, that I matched at Campbell Clinic. So And if you have any other questions, like Emily said, happy to answer anything.
So I think one of the burning questions that as M3s coming up on interviews next year have is how were you able to kind of assess these programs as things changed with COVID? You were doing all your interviews online. Did you feel like they adequately provided you with kind of like, how did you assess culture kind of over online, and kind of what helped you form those decisions with them being such different interview setups this year?
That's a good question. I think it was really hard this year. I've talked with my other people that were applying this year, and we all kind of, at least people I talked to, felt like it was really hard to gauge. Like they kind of blurred together to an extent, especially if you had a lot of them earlier on or later on, like really close together. For me, there were certain programs that I knew location-wise I was more interested in, so I reached out to residents and would ask them, like, can we talk on the phone? And you can get a better sense if you're just talking one-on-one, and they like, it's not in their best interest to lie and get you there and then you be unhappy. So I felt like most of the answers that I was getting from residents were really straightforward and really honest. It's hard to do if you can't do that at every program. At least I didn't do it at every program. There are some that you'll get a sense for at the pre-interview socials and stuff. You can kind of get a sense, and then the interview day itself, depending on how long the interviews are, you can see if you kind of are vibing with the people. But it is hard. I think not being there in person takes away a little bit from that, but I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of going into it, I interviewed at the University of Iowa, and I thought they were going to be like my number one choice. I was super pumped about them. And then there was only, I think, one resident there during the interview. And the interview was really like, what would you do in this situation as a chief resident? And I was like, I don't know. So that kind of annoyed me. And then I ended up dropping them quite a bit farther. So it was kind of one of those things where it's like, Annalie said, you kind of get a feeling, once you're there. And I also tried to reach out to, residents. Once I got an interview, I would email the coordinator and just say if there's any residents, available to talk, just so I could kind of get like a little bit of a vibe from them, just because a lot of them, were wanting to shoot you straight, and it wasn't, on the Zoom meeting when they're around their, faculty and things like that. So for the most part, I got really good vibes everywhere, except for Iowa. For me, that was one. But everything else, like I felt like I got really good vibes from. So it was a great interview season, and I enjoyed doing it on Zoom. So I don't know what you guys think, but.
Yeah, I think that was the $1 million question. Like all of us had kind of going into the season, we were all super nervous about how to kind of gauge what programs we got along with, where we enjoyed. I kind of cheated matching it somewhere I had a chance to rotate at already. But I will say for the places I didn't rotate at that I interviewed with, I don't know if I have a good answer other than you kind of just do. Like at the end of the interview day, you kind of just get a sense of, yeah, I felt like I got along with these people, or no, I didn't. One thing that was nice about the Zoom interviews, I felt like most places I interviewed with that at had breakout rooms that were just you with one attending. So I felt like a lot of places I interviewed with up to like 8 to 10 attendings, one-on-one for like 10 minutes each. Those are the people you're going to be working with a majority of the time. So I felt like by the end of it, I really got a vibe of, yeah, I got along with these attendings pretty well, or maybe the fit just wasn't as good as other places. The other nice thing, the resident socials kind of give you a sense, maybe not as well as you could in person, going out to dinner with them the night before and whatnot. But a lot of them were super friendly. And at the end of pretty much every resident social, I think all of them just, gave their emails or phone numbers, whatever it was. And I really encourage, just reaching out to at least one that you feel like you would get along with at each place, because they all seem really happy to help and answer any questions one-on-one. And that kind of gives you a better sense of the program too. Most people that at the programs are pretty nice and happy to help. So I wouldn't be intimidated about reaching out to a resident to get a better feel for the culture, because I thought that personally helped me a lot too.
Yeah, I honestly don't have too much to add. Vafa kind of hit a lot of the stuff that I wanted to mention. Kind of like it varies based on the structure of kind of each program. A lot of them will have those breakout rooms. I had a couple of interviews where I sat for about 2 hours and I could just, ask some residents every single question that I had, or anything that I thought from the previous night with the socials or anything like that. And I'm also fortunate enough, kind of like every place that I interviewed, there was a KU grad there for some reason. So I felt like that was kind of an in. So I would kind of get their information, their email, and just let them know that I'm from KU, and that kind of made them, I think, feel a little bit more comfortable. But then that also helped in kind of giving us, a comparison to what I know here versus kind of what it's like there. So I would say you don't be afraid to reach out, kind of like Wafa said. It's a really good point.
Another thing just that I think the Zoom interview lets you do that you couldn't do in person is take notes. Like I would, after an interview, you'll have a break period, and I wrote notes like, really liked this interview, or really liked this about the program, or if when they're giving you the program overview, like what's their call schedule like I looked back at that a lot when I was making my rank list, because I couldn't remember half the schools at the very beginning of what their call schedule was like things that you realize that you want to know later on when you're really nitpicking your list. And that's kind of one of the things I was glad that I had done at the end of the interview season.
Overall, I would say if you guys end up having a Zoom format too, don't worry about it, because I would say all of us were pleasantly surprised with how well it worked and how well we were able to kind of gauge each program. So if that's what ends up happening next year, I think it's pros and cons to each, but it worked out pretty well.
I would agree. I actually did a similar thing to what Annalise did, and I kind of took some notes as I was going too. I kind of had a lot of interviews all at once though, and like even though I referenced back at those notes, the kind of thing that I, in making my list, I kind of just, you're left with a general feeling, like I like these people, I didn't like these people, I kind of fit in, I think I could see myself there, and that's kind of, what you're looking for there. Also, don't be afraid to ask people, like, what are you looking for? Like, I just asked program directors, I was like, what makes somebody a good fit at your program? Now's the time to find out.
Awesome. So kind of going off what you guys already talked about. Hello to those. My name is Karam. I just want to ask, on that whole interview process, was there something that kind of surprised you, or you didn't expect, or like you didn't feel like you were prepared for?
Yeah, it just doesn't happen very often. Well, I think it really only happened like maybe twice or 3 times for me. But the like scenario-based questions, like I just thought that was ridiculous, and I was kind of annoyed just because, like, why, if you're trying to, you want to get to know us type of thing. So kind of prepare, I guess, for that, if because it can happen. But really, for the most part, they're all just really trying to get to know you, because like Ruben said, they really want to know if you're a good fit for their program. So really just be yourself, because if you try to put on a show or anything like that, then you may end up being in a program that is nothing like you. So I would really just try to be yourself, and then the rest is kind of meant for fate. So that's at least my thing that surprised me. The other thing that surprised me too is just that overall, like Vafa said too earlier, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought the Zoom meetings were awesome, really convenient. I could just walk into my room and wearing my suit and pants. By the way, you got to do that because somebody asked me to stand up. So and then and just talk from there. So it was a lot more chill in my opinion. And I also, like everybody said, I had notes pulled up. I had an extra monitor behind my computer, so I just kind of read from those notes in case I forgot something that I wanted to ask. And that was kind of my process. But yeah.
Can you stand up for us, Elliot?
I don't have to wear pants for this thing, do I?
Yeah, I feel like the only thing that I was surprised by was I only have one interview that had a like pimping room where they had you go through, like, read an x-ray and go through what the surgery options are and what approaches, and go through all of that and like complications and stuff. And I like didn't do well in that. It wasn't pretty, but I don't think studying would have helped me necessarily, especially during interview season. Like, you're just trying to figure out so much at the time that you're interviewing anyways, that I wouldn't like kill yourself over that. And like there was only one school of all the schools that I interviewed at that did that, and I didn't match at it. I didn't really want to. So I think you'll be fine. You don't need to like be stressed about that kind of a thing.
I would say also have a good joke ready, because I got asked to tell a joke a couple times, and if you don't have one ready, that could be kind of stressful and get you off guard. So just have one good joke in your back pocket in case.
That's a good. The advice I got was like have one clean joke and then one dirty joke. Just read the room on that one. The only thing that I would add is like what I felt surprised by is just kind of how laid back everything kind of was. I was expecting it to be pretty structured and kind of people grilling me and that kind of stuff. But honestly, they might have like one or two standard interview questions. One of them being like, "Oh, so what did you choose ortho?" And like obviously you have to be prepared for that, for those kind of questions, but for the most part, they're just kind of trying to get to gauge what kind of person you are and get to know you outside of everything that's kind of in your application. So aside from that first one question or maybe two, it's all kind of like, and also have some questions for them too. Some people would just ask, kind of like, okay, so what questions do you have for me? And then it's kind of weird if you don't have anything, and then it's just kind of a dead 10 minutes, 10 to 15. So have some questions ready too.
Yeah, going off of what Ruben said, I think I had a few interviews where the entire like session that I would have with attendings were like, so this is just for you to ask me questions. And I was like, for 15 minutes. So definitely make sure you have several well thought out questions.
Did you typically try to ask a question that was specific to that program, or did you have some general questions in your pocket that you could kind of hold on to?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I was always look up the attendings I was interviewing with, and like, I would, if it was a trauma attending, I was could you talk a little bit more about trauma experience, just because you get them to talk about what they love to do, so then you have a little bit more time, where you don't have to think of 10 other questions if they're just like simple yes or no questions. So that, and then just kind of general things, like any weaknesses that they, in the program, or maybe like the things that they like the most about the program that isn't necessarily well known, stuff like that. Those are kind of general questions that I would always ask, but then I always tried to ask at least a few specific questions.
Yeah, I had some, especially if I was really interested in a program and I was really excited about it, I would look at the program before and get some questions ready, because you're gonna at least meet with a program director and the chair, and so it's good to have questions prepared. I remember Washington specifically, the chair and the program director both just started out the interview with like, what questions do you have for me? And there was no intro questions for me. I had to just kind of go straight in with whatever I thought was important about making a decision about a program. And then I had some generic ones that for residents specifically, I always asked, what's the toughest part of residency been, especially if they were the 5th years, because then they'll be honest with you. And I always thought it was interesting because you get a lot of different answers, and that can kind of tell you about if you're going in with eyes wide open and knowing what the hardest part of the process will be, at least from their perspective. That's kind of something that I thought was important and I wanted to know. But yeah.
Yeah, another question too I always like to ask was like when they felt comfortable nailing a long bone, especially if they're like a chief or something like that. That way you can kind of gauge a little bit more of, because some programs like, oh, we're in the operating room early and often, and you're kind of, and then they're like, oh, I didn't feel comfortable until this year or something. So then you kind of know. But that was just another question that I found that I like to ask, and kind of sparked a little bit more of a conversation.
This year was a little bit weird in terms of rotations and just everything going on. But I was wondering, with places that you guys interviewed at or that you were accepted to, did you have prior connections, whether with attendings or physicians or residents?
Or a KU alumnus for that matter, I think, Ruben, you were the one who said that.
Yeah, that was kind of like, the places I kind of extended some interviews to me. In looking through the residents and kind of researching the program, I found some that were KU residents, and that was kind of helpful because then they know, hopefully it's a good resident and they like that resident, so they're more, apt to take more students from KU. I forgot, could you repeat that question? I'm sorry,
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any prior connections before you like interviewed or were accepted somewhere.
That's right. Okay. Yes. So the thing that I was gonna say is like you kind of have to cast a pretty wide net just because it's so competitive. So you tend to look geographically first, and I feel like a lot of the places that I did end up getting interviews from were kind of had some ties to the program. Either I have family that lives there, I lived there at some point, some family distant or something like that, I spent some time at that program for some reason, or like anything like that. Most of the time it wasn't a connection to the staff per se, but those things can only help you. So
yeah, I didn't decide on ortho until like I was a third year, so I didn't know a lot of the ortho people in the class above me, so I didn't really know where they went or matched at. There were some places that I interviewed that I found out through the interview that they had Kansas people there that I just probably should have looked that up before and didn't know until they told me. But I feel like it doesn't, it'll help you maybe if you like really know somebody, but I didn't, and I got interviews at random places that didn't have Kansas connections really.
We've got a question in the chat asking if you guys kind of got a feel about how much of the match was interview driven versus like step score and, number driven, I guess.
Yeah, so I had to ask this question actually to a few of the residents that I'd randomly talked to, and it sounded more to me that it was based off of so your score gets you into the door for the interview, and then they typically don't use your score again when they're deciding. It's more of overall what they felt like with how the interview went. That's how some of the residents I talked to, a resident from Emory specifically, who said that they had an entire thing set out, and they don't even look at your scores once you have an interview, and it's all based off of how you did in the interview and how well they thought that you overall vibed with them and their program. So that's a big thing, and if the program is, if they're deciding it based off of a step score, that's not really a program I'd want to go to, just because I'd be like, if somebody has a 2-point higher step 1 score than me, then what does that mean, or what does that matter, type of thing. So I wouldn't necessarily worry so much about that. Once you get the interview, the only thing you need to focus on is being yourself and doing your best. And like Annalise said, I didn't mean earlier to stress over studying scenarios by any means, but I would just kind of prepare yourself mentally that could happen. But really, for the most part, you just want to look up the program, know as much as you can about everybody that's interviewing you, those sorts of things. That way you're engaged and you have good questions, because that's what they want. They want to see that you're a normal person and that you care and that you want to be there, and you don't feel like you're privileged to have this interview, and that you're still working hard to hopefully get to where you want to be.
Yeah, I think the sense that I got was your step score gets you in the door and gets your name not screened out, basically, because they have so many applications and so many people are applying tons of places now. But once you're in the interview, it's never talked about, and they always they'll have your application out and they'll be like, well, impressive application, and you can tell that they probably haven't really looked at it that much, but then they'll be like, honestly, my hobbies were the one thing that almost every single interview they asked me about. I put that I watch reality TV with my cat, and every single interview, I think I got asked what TV show I'm watching, and then what my cat's name was, and just he kind of conversation flows from there. So I really didn't get the sense that step score, I'm not on the board, I'm not in the room, so I'm not sure exactly what conversations are going on, but I never got the sense that was something that was a huge determinant after you get the interview.
Yeah, going off what Annalise said, I kind of joke about this, but the more I joke, the more I'm realizing I'm actually being serious. I think the most important part of your ERAS section is the hobbies and interests section, because that drives 60-70% of your interview discussions. I had so many rooms that just walk in and immediately just ask, oh, so you do this, or tell me about this. So I know a lot of people at first just kind of jot down a couple things, but really when it comes time to fill out your application, make sure you put down a decent amount of hobbies where you're actually interested in and can speak on. The other thing I was going to say, and I can't emphasize how chill and relaxed I feel like a lot of the interviews actually are. You think it's going to be this stressful residency interview, but really it's just to get to know you, because I think what everyone was already saying, a lot of it is interview driven. They don't want you to be stressed out, see how much orthopedic knowledge you have. They don't really care about that, because you're going to learn all of that during the 5 years. They just want to see what kind of co-resident you're going to be, resident for the attendings, and a lot of that just comes from getting to know you as a person. So again, not to repeat everything they're saying, but once you get the interview, it's just about being relaxed and being yourself, and the match just kind of works itself out, puts you where you're meant to be.
I was going to add something real quick, just from our perspective. So they're doing away with the step one scores. It's, I think, next year. I think we have one more year where we get the step one scores, and then it's going to be pass fail. And so the screening process is going to be different. There's still going to be step two, but I don't know how much people are going to use that. I would be on the lookout for a lot of residency programs to start requiring you to write essays. And as much as painful and horrible as that sounds, just coming from the other side of things, I mean, people apply to 100 and some odd places, and and it's impossible to filter through 900 applicants for 4 spots here. And so if you take away a tool like a board score that can quickly put X number into the circular file bin, now you have to figure out, all right, how do I actually weed this number down? And you're not going to sit there and read 900 applications. What you're going to do is raise the bar to applying to your program. And so, those are the conversations going on behind the scenes in terms of from program directors and whatnot around the country, is how do we make sure that the people applying here actually want to come here, and how do we screen out 900 people if we don't have a board score? So, there's always going to be a screening process. It's just what that screening process looks like, and it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of years what programs do to try to filter through the volume of applications that we get.
Yeah, and there's places that also do that already. Like Washington had a pretty significant essay portion that you had to submit with it, and like Wichita, you have to write your personal statement handwritten and mail it in. It's just like a way of getting rid of people that are not looking at applicants that aren't serious about your program, who are just like casting the widest net they possibly can. So that was something that I didn't think about before, and then I kind of freaked out with like a month before everything was due, where I was like, oh no, I need to go through every program that I'm applying to and make sure there's not supplemental, because there was a lot that also you just had to send like an email with a statement of interest and stuff like that you have to go to their website to see, or sometimes there's like a Reddit sheet about it. But that was something that I didn't think about until later in the game that I wish I had.
Annalise and Dr. Sweeney, both of you have alluded to this. Orthopedics historically is a tough residency to get into, and then you add COVID and virtual interviews and kind of the over flooding of applications. On that topic, obviously next year is a little different considering there might be in-person interviews, but how many programs did you guys apply to? How many programs did you rank? How many programs did you interview at, roughly?
I think that's a really good question. There was a little bit of guidance that came out of the Association of, oh, sorry, my mic cut out there. AOA and some other stuff that tried to give us some guidance as opposed to how many programs they recommended that we end up applying to based kind of like on your step one score, to try to minimize the amount of people that were kind of take up a lot of interviews. And so I kind of like try to abide by that, but at the same time, you got to look out for number one. So I think, based off my step one score, I think the recommendation was to apply to no more than 60, and I ended up doing 75. So out of all of those, there was a ton of those, kind of like Annalise said, that required secondary stuff. For the most part, I thought I got most of those. I only ended up getting 6 interviews out of the 75. So I went on all 6 interviews and I ranked all 6 places. I think that's it, right? But we're still in here.
Yeah, yeah, and I did. I applied to 60 programs, and I got 20 interviews total. I went on 14 of them, and I ranked all 14 of mine.
I was pretty similar to Ruben. I applied to about 85 places, got 9 interviews, and went on all 9 of them.
I'm really neurotic, and I over applied like a crazy person, and I applied to like around 100, and then I got around 30 interviews and went on about 17. I should have probably applied to less, but I don't know, it was COVID year, and I was really just worried about what was going to happen with how many interviews were actually going to be sent out. So in retrospect, probably should have done less. If you guys want like stats and numbers and stuff to compare yourself, and then you can reach out to us and like we can give you more information, because I feel like it's a super person to person kind of decision depending on what your stats are and what kind of research and what your whole profile looks like. So, but also talk to your advisors and actually listen to them, because I was told to not to apply to that many and they were right. And it was kind of a waste of money.
Okay, so I have a question. You mentioned strengths for application, and a couple of you maybe alluded to this, but just like from your perspective, two parts. One, what do you think was like your best foot forward, like your awesome strengths that people picked up on or that you brought to the table? And then two, did you find that there was like a hidden strength in your application that came out that like helped you? So maybe kind of alluding to what Bob said about like your hobbies and activities. So two-part question as we're looking, you know, for things to involve ourselves in over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I can't really, this is kind of different for me. I'm a little bit non-traditional. I was in the Army for 6 years before medical school, and deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, was all over the world and stuff. So I have a little bit of a different trajectory. So, I mean, probably not joining the Army is the best decision for you guys right now. But that's really that was probably my biggest strength, you know, that everybody wanted to talk about, you know, my deployments, things like that. So maybe it's a little bit unfair that I had that, just because, you know, a lot of people go from high school to college right into medical school, and that just wasn't my path. So I just kind of made my story a little bit more unique. But, you know, I think really the main things, you know, get involved with research. That was one of the things I did. I ended up having like 22 research items on my ARIS, and that was just because I started early as an M1 and really worked hard to, I mean, I didn't necessarily like doing research, but I worked hard just so I could figure it out and actually know how to, you know, do research and, you know, read research articles and actually be able to get takeaways from what's going on. So I think that's huge. And then obviously if you do have research during the interview, you really got to know that inside and out, because one program I think asked me like about a paper that was in my research article that I've written, and I was like, whoa, I don't know that one. So really you got to kind of know all the insides and outs of everything you're doing there. But I think that really just shows, you know, that you're interested and you want to continue to, you know, educate yourself and grow. And I think research is a big part of it. And, you know, I don't think that's necessarily a make or break for you guys having a lot of research or not, but I definitely think it helps. And then, you know, it just kind of shows that you're, you know, more interested and you're willing to go the extra mile and put in more work, and, you know, as medical school is hard enough. So.
Kind of going off what Elliot said, I didn't have like a whole lot of research, but one of the projects I did have was through the Clendenning Fellowship that summer after your M1 year. And that was brought up in pretty much all of my interviews. I did a project overseas in Greece, was able to travel there for 4 weeks. So it was a lot of fun, but it was a fun project to work on as well. And my point with that being that like obviously orthopedic research is really good to have, and it's going to help you a lot. But if you know, come across opportunities that are outside the realm of orthopedics and they're pretty unique and special, don't be afraid to pursue those, because it is interesting, and it's probably just something different when they review, you know, hundreds of applications and you have a different type of project or something different on your application that's unique. Don't be afraid to pursue it if it's slightly outside the realm of orthopedics. The other thing I was going to say, I think all four of us actually were involved with CAMP, the Clinical Anatomy Mentorship Program. That's something we started this year with Dr. Templeton. And it was, one, a really cool experience, but two, a lot of people talked about it in my interviews because it really highlights your commitment to education. And as a resident, you're going to be expected to be kind of that bridge to medical students and, you know, helping medical student education. So being able to see that you're committed to that, you've had experience with that. And, you know, I don't think there's a whole lot of medical students getting involved in anatomy education out there. So that's kind of a cool, especially from peer-to-peer in a peer-to-peer setting. So if you haven't looked into that, I definitely encourage it. Your M3 year and M4 year, but that was something that kind of got brought up a lot. That was, I guess, different.
Yeah, that I talked about that one a lot in my interviews too. That was probably like one of the things that I got asked a lot was, what's your favorite thing, or what are you most proud of on your resume? It can be, you know, school related or not. And that was something that when I first got asked it, I was kind of caught off guard because I didn't really know. And then camp was an easy thing to talk about. just because you talk about teaching, you talk about ortho, and you work on a curriculum together as part of the mentor role. So that was an easy thing to talk about. And then I think letters were the other thing that kept getting brought up in my interviews, at least. And that was something that you don't get to read them. So I didn't really know what they were talking about, but it got brought up multiple times. Like, clearly they like you in Kansas, and they talked about how the residents felt. And I think that some of my letter writers probably talked to residents. So I think working hard on your sub-I and having that be something that the residents notice, that then they can communicate to your letter writers, is something that I didn't really think about at the time. But in retrospect, when I'm thinking about what I was asked about and what got brought up in my interviews, it seems like that was something that they liked and they wanted to talk about.
Neat. So in answering your question, I feel like this is a little bit unfair, but some of the strengths that are in my application are the fact that I speak Spanish. It was my first language. I'm able to read and write, and I'm certified through KU to serve as an interpreter. So I feel like a lot of people wanted to know more about that. And then some of the stuff that kind of came up kind of in conversation, in interview, or some of the stuff that I put into my personal statement, just some of the stuff that, I wrote for people to get to know me a little bit better outside of what's already on my application. So I just wrote about stuff that's not on there, stuff like me being an immigrant coming over to the States in 2004. I was born in Mexico. Actually, my father is still there, so I just still try to visit whenever possible. I wasn't eligible for student aid, during undergrad, so I had to work all through undergrad. But so people thought that, people are looking for resilience and commitment to education and that kind of stuff, and that's putting it into practice. So I thought that, that kind of, I was able to showcase a little bit of that through there. Man, I had something else and I kind of escaped my mind, but that's, some of the stuff that kind of comes up.
And there's one last question before we go into the breakout rooms.
Sorry, one question I would ask is just having, completed the whole match process now and having gone through it all and looking back on it, is there anything that you wish you would have done differently?
Honestly, I feel like no. I mean, I maybe applied a fewer places, listened to my mentors more, maybe get more research, but I honestly don't. I only had like 3 or 4 things. So Elliot, props to you. That's insane. But I think maybe that could have helped at some places, but I don't really feel like, I don't know. I feel like I was pretty stressed anyways in med school, so I didn't need to add a whole lot. I feel like you just match where you're meant to go. I don't know. I think it works out.
I would say I think my M1, M2 self kind of knew I was interested in orthopedics, but I was a little intimidated by just how competitive you hear the field is. So if you're younger and you think you're interested, don't be afraid to kind of embrace that and get involved early. Because by the time M3 year came around and I knew I wanted to do it, I was like, man, I really wish I kind of started a little bit earlier with that stuff. And then on the flip side of that, if you're an M3 and you're kind of realizing, you're interested in orthopedics, don't be afraid to pursue that either. Because I think 3 or 4, I think maybe even all of us didn't really know we wanted to do orthopedics or commit to it till our 3rd year, and it worked out just fine. So I would say overall, just be way more relaxed, because at the end you just end up where you're meant to be, and you just got to trust the process. So don't stress too much over it, and just if you're interested, commit, and you'll be fine. And have fun with it. It's a fun process.
I agree with Annalise and Vafa. And looking back, I probably wouldn't have done so much research. I don't think it was really that important. I kind of stressed myself out, like Annalise said, during my 1 and 2 years. But really, yeah, just enjoy the process. And I kind of going off of what Annalise said earlier too, is really, really take into consideration your sub-Is, because I tried to study, I tried to study my ass off for anatomy and things like that, but it's like you, not only that, but like you need to be reading ortho bullets, hopping fields, looking up the approaches, because that's going to tell you everything. Because if they're tending to ask you, like, what are we worried about in this approach, then based off of what you read on hopping fields and things like that. And I really wish I would have spent more time doing that. Just because I think that's vital, to your success and to your letters, and things like that. And their KU isn't huge into like pimping by any means or anything like that, and they're definitely not going to make you feel stupid. So I mean that's huge too. But really, if they don't ask you questions, you still need to be studying and staying up on it. It's only gonna, in the long term, it's only gonna aid to your success. So, and I also put my number in there, Dozy. I just saw you, so shout out to you, man. How are you doing? But happy to help with anybody if you have any questions. You can call me at any time. I'm just chilling, so just let me know.
All right, I just threw my stuff in there as well. Holla at your boy. Part of me wants to say I would change some stuff, but at the same time, like I made it, so I don't know if I, in retrospect, I would really want to do it. The one thing that I would say though is, it feels weird going on these interviews and stuff like that, and like talking about yourself. In a sense, you're kind of having to like brag about yourself. But that being said, I feel like maybe for the first couple of ones, I wasn't the best advocate, as I could have been. And you are your own best advocate. So I would say, like, don't be afraid to talk about what's meaningful, what's important to you, what you find importance in, what you find meaning in, what and just be honest with them, So I feel like that's the one thing that I might change, is I might be a little bit more serious about it, I suppose, or maybe not as, what's the word, modest.
You're too humble.
I mean, hey, when you got it, you got it. I don't know.
It is weird, but you, like Ruben said, you really got to sell yourself. Like, I can't emphasize that enough. That's super important. And like, you would help me. I don't know if like Vafa or any of you guys did this either, but like I wrote down, like looked up like the most frequently asked orthopedic interview questions. And I hand wrote out all of my answers to those, and tried to formulate it the best I could. Because, you don't want to be like, you want to be humble, but you don't want to be like selling yourself short. So really focus on those, and you got to sell yourself, because it's just so limited amount of time that you're talking with these people. So I can't emphasize that enough. It's huge.
It's weird how you're able to take my point and speak on it way better than I did. So congratulations.
You're being too humble again, Ruben.
Well, I just wanted to give thank you to all of you guys before we break out. We have a Google Doc that y'all should click on, and we'll send the email out later. And also, if you have comments for the panelists, throw it in there too. We'll send them their way too.
All right, well, I'm going to open up breakout rooms, and it'll just put each of the panelists in a room, and then it'll randomly distribute the students amongst those rooms. So, but feel free, if you had a burning question for somebody you wanted to ask her, learn more about something, you should be able to change a breakout room pretty easily just by clicking the breakout rooms button. So if you give me just a second, I'll make this room make these rooms for us.
And we'll end the meeting after the breakout room. So I just want to say thank you to our panelists. Congratulations again. It's a big achievement. And thank you for your time. And thanks to everyone else for coming. So we hope that this was an informative session for you.